Well, it's that time again. That time when we walk into the virtual bar and find out that there's a UFO convention in town. Our heroic band of pastors then begin to discuss UFOs and other paranormal phenomenon. We're your hosts, Chris, Ken, and Greg, and this is three pastors walk into a strangely sci-fi based bar.
in outer space.
Something like that.
Kind of looks like the cantina in here.
Yeah, today is a pretty interesting day because in looking at like the things that we wanted to do, Ken came up with this weird idea, right? And what was that weird idea, Ken? You know what that is, don't you?
No, it must be something I don't watch.
That is the theme to the X-Files.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite shows back
That was
in
good.
the 80s when I was growing up as a youngster in the hard streets of Pensacola.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Tough. Pensacola, man.
Did I ever tell you I went to a MUFON convention once?
MUFON. Explain MUFON.
I forget what the actual acronym means, but basically it's the Mutual UFO Network, something like that. But it's a whole bunch of people that have experienced UFO phenomenon.
Phenomenon.
Yep. I was really into that at one point in my life. I lived in Pensacola, which was right outside of Gulf Breeze, Florida. And if you have followed any UFO lore, then Gulf Breeze is right at the top of your list as far as UFO phenomenon is concerned. There was a guy in Gulf Breeze that took some photographs that became of some notoriety in UFO circles.
I thought you were going to say he took some drugs. And
He probably did that too. Yeah, there was plenty of that. Yeah. Yeah. So the question that we're asking today is, are we alone in the universe? And this is going to be, apparently, I think it's going to be part one in a whole series of talking about weird things. What are we going to call this series?
Weird things.
Weird Things.
Yes.
Episode 1.
Strangest things.
Strangest things. Not Stranger Things. Strangest things.
Strangest.
Because that would be copyright infringement to call it Stranger Things.
Won't do that.
We don't want to do that. It's going to be strangest things.
Boldly go where no pastors have gone before.
Well, actually, plenty of pastors have gone there before. That's
Weirdly go.
Yeah.
No pastors have gone.
I mean,
before.
that's like
I see a hand.
That's like a thing.
Okay, Kim has stepped into the bar with us.
We're only filming a
And,
podcast, Kim. What you want to come in and have a conversation?
Okay, she's telling us to keep talking while she takes a
So weird.
picture.
Do you believe in aliens?
Do you believe in aliens, Kim?
Look, it's a UFO.
Woman
Kim,
on the street.
do you believe in aliens? We want your comment.
She's an unidentified female object.
I refuse to comment on that, but I don't believe in Sasquatch.
What?
Wow. She won't comment on whether she believes on UFOs, but she's a staunch opponent of the belief of Sasquatch.
I have friends that have personally seen him and related that information to
No,
me.
your wife waking up in the morning seeing you doesn't count.
Oh, that's Bob.
Yeah.
Love you, Bob.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, man.
Bye, Kim. Thanks for stopping
Thank you,
by.
Kim, for stopping by and interrupting everything.
In the bar.
Great work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in this series, we'll be talking about UFOs and aliens. We will be talking about ghosts and poltergeists and the things of that nature. We'll be talking about cryptids, which is things like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra. Chupacabra. If you're from Southern California, you're probably pretty familiar with Chupacabra.
I have never heard that term.
You never heard the term Chupacabra?
Mm-mm. So it's like the alternate form of Chewbacca or something?
Mm-mm.
No. What is it? Talk to me.
That's the coolest name of them all, though.
Yeah, I think Chupacabra is good.
Chupacabra.
There's one in Africa called the Mbagamaga. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's spelled kind of like that.
Done.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's some good ones out there. And
this podcast is to inform people, right? So, Chupacabra. Talk to me.
Chupacabra. Well, we'll do that in the cryptid episode. Yeah, we got to save.
I am so excited about hearing something that's from my home state.
Well, actually, I think it's from like Mexican bordering states or something.
kind of.
Okay. All right.
South American.
So if you're from San Diego, you know about it.
One thing that I didn't see on the list of cryptids was the skinwalker. I didn't see that on there.
Yeah. That's kind of creepy.
But I don't know if that's a cryptid or if that's like a mythological creature or like a paranormal creature or something.
Well, explain cryptid. What's a cryptid?
A cryptid is, there's a whole field of study for people that study animals that are creatures that are paranormal in their kind of scope, I guess. Okay. So like very rare, mythological,
can't be scientifically proven to exist.
Lore-based kind of things.
Okay.
So like the North American Indian Thunderbird, Mothman,
okay, Loch
Loch Ness Monster. You know,
nothing to do with cryptos then.
Not cryptocurrency. No.
Okay.
The what's his name? Satoshi Nakamoto Toshikoshi or whatever his name was. Yeah,
that guy
created it. Yeah. Anyways, we're not talking about that today.
Nope. Talking about aliens.
We're talking about aliens. Aliens. Ask yourself a question. What do you believe in aliens? Oh, before we can start getting into this stuff, what have you ever had an encounter with something you would consider to be extraterrestrial?
You know, yes. Coming out of the hospital over in Post Falls, just I don't know, 7-8 years back, whenever my beautiful wife got her second hip replacement, it was dark, and I walked out, and I knew there was a mountain across the way, and there was 2 lights. Big lights, very bright lights. And I just stood there going, I wonder what that is. And I think, well, maybe it's the light on top of the mountain there on the antennas and stuff. And I thought, no. And so one of them, it was hard to tell distances at night. One of them just shot off to the south, pew, it was gone. And I was like, what the heck was that? And then I started thinking, drones, is there somebody up there? What's going on? Mm-hmm. And so I took my phone out and I started filming the second one, and it did the same thing, and it went south or to my left at a high rate of speed and did a 90-degree turn and went up and was gone. Just disappeared.
Wow, that's a good one, Greg.
Yeah, and I was like, what did I just witness?
Yeah.
And then the other day, somebody sent me a picture of all this string of lights in the sky. And before I even got it, he sent another text saying, figured out what it was. And apparently the Starlink satellites were all lined up or something. And it was quite a phenomenal thing.
Yeah, they're pretty cool looking. Yeah, how about you, Ken? You ever had any kind of...
The closest I came to was, you've seen shooting stars when you're driving at night out in the middle of nowhere. Well, one night I saw one at flashed from behind me to in front of me, and I nearly jerked the steering wheel because I thought I was going to hit it. It seemed that close.
Wow.
And I was looking around like, where did that thing go? But it must have been a visual phenomenon. It just seemed like it was that close. Really wasn't, or it burned up in the atmosphere or whatever. But that one was super close. That kind of startled me. Like, that's different.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Of all the supernatural things that I have encountered, I have never encountered an unidentified flying object. That's one thing that I've never seen. I mean, I've seen things flying in the sky, but nothing that I would would catch me off guard or make me think that's definitely a UFO. Not like yours, like where it like flew off and then it's like kind of like high rates of speed or whatever. I've seen lights in the sky kind of floating around or whatever, but I've never experienced anything like a UFO.
Outside of the norm.
Yeah.
No. But what's interesting is that if you believe in statistics and you believe that America is a country that is largely made up of people who are believers, then a large percentage of believers have actually had experiences where they have seen or had interactions with unidentified flying objects or what we would consider being called aliens. That's an interesting statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it makes it so that you cannot dismiss it out of hand. I think you wrote a statistic here about 2/3 of Americans, 65%, say their best guess is that alien or intelligent life exists on other planets. According to a Pew Research Center survey conducted just before June 25th of 2021, release of the government preliminary assessment on the Office of Director of National Intelligence on Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, that there is a government office called the Director of National Intelligence on Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon.
It's kind of weird.
I mean, that says a lot. You know what I mean? There's something that is going on. I've always thought that, though, even though I've never seen one. I've always thought that there's got to be something going on, because you can't just have all these people having all these experiences and then just kind of dismiss it. Right? It's just not something that makes sense.
I can't remember who it was, but I was listening to a guy one time, and he was conjecturing that perhaps these phenomenon are actual angels. And they're, coming in and out of our realm, if you will, and they manifest themselves. We have proof of that through the Bible, where angels show up to people, and what's the first thing an angel says?
Yeah,
You
Chuck
Do not
Missler.
fear.
Chuck Missler wrote a book, UFO. What was it? Alien Encounters, I think is what it was called, and he wrote that it was perhaps aliens coming in and out of our existence.
Aliens or angels?
Angels. Angels. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of things to discuss here. There's a couple of verses I'll get to, and then I've got a whole litany of articles and things that we can look at from different sources. One of them being the Baptist News Global. Because even the Baptists have determined that it is something that we cannot ignore. And there's a lot at stake, actually, because if
we have aliens within our denomination,
not illegal ones, though.
Identified.
We have legal aliens in our.
Some are identified, but
immigration, border patrol, all of our aliens are legal. Okay.
No, I was thinking of the weird ones. Those out there. We have some people that are out there.
There's definitely some aliens in North Idaho. That's for sure. But there are some serious theological questions that come up when you start considering the fact that there might be life on other planets, particularly intelligent life. That terrifies a lot of theologians, because if you were to determine and confirm that there was intelligent life on other planets, what does that do to your Earth-centered theology? And Carl Sagan actually had a term for this idea that we are the only people in the universe. It was called, I think he called it Earth chauvinism, where it was like, we have enough hubris to think that we're the only intelligent life in the universe.
Who do we think we are?
Yeah.
The highest form of life.
The highest form of life in the universe. That's a sad statement right there.
And unless all the movies are true, there's no proof of any of that.
Well, I mean, think about it statistically. If you just do math, statistically, it would be almost impossible to imagine a world where no other life existed on any other planet that orbited any other star in the Milky Way, not just the Milky Way, but in other galaxies as well. There's a
Universe.
lot of space out there.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
But why? I don't find it personally hard to believe.
Yeah.
Because that would, if I did believe that, then that would put a dent in my faith for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't.
You just choose to
choose
say
to-
there can't be. It's impossible.
Yeah, show me the proof.
Yeah.
You know, of course, some people say that about my faith too.
Yeah, right.
Show me the proof.
It's interesting because so the U.S. government made this statement. They said, our analysis of the data supports the construct that if and when individual UAP incidences are resolved, they will fall into one of 5 potential explanatory categories: airborne clutter, natural atmospheric phenomenon, U.S. government or U.S. industry development programs, foreign adversary systems, and a catch-all other bin. So they have an other bin.
That's the
What the heck
scary
is
one.
that?
You know, it's like, well, we don't know if it's any of these 4 things, so it just goes in the miscellaneous file,
Okay, so
which is otherwise called the X file.
the X file. I like it.
Yeah.
When did we go from a UFO to a UAP?
When the modern U.S. government got heavily involved.
And when was that?
It's been involved for a long time, but one of the most credible incidences that have happened really recently that was actually filmed by our fighter jets
Yeah, saw that.
was the USS Nimitz Carrier Group
Mhm.
back in 2004.
Yeah, that was so cool.
Yep, they were tracking objects that appeared over the Pacific Ocean at 80,000 feet for a long period of time. They deployed 2 FA-18F fighter jets from the Nimitz to go check it out. When they arrived, they reported these were Air Force, these were
Mhm.
Navy pilots.
Yeah.
These are not just like
Yep.
some conspiracy guy in an Airstream in Yellowstone with antennas hanging all over
Yeah.
the place. Okay, these are Air Force or Navy fighter
Fighter
pilots, intelligent people.
It's a man and a woman.
When they appeared, when they showed up, they first saw churning water with a shadow of an oval shape underneath the surface. Then in a few moments, a white tic-tac shaped object appeared above the water. It had no visible markings to indicate an engine, wing, or windows, and infrared monitors did not reveal any exhaust. The Black Aces Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate of Strike Fighter Squadron 41 attempted to intercept the craft, but it accelerated away, reappearing on radar 60 miles away. It moved 3 times the speed of sound and more than twice the speed of the fighter jets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, they've been involved for a long time. You could argue that they have been involved since Roswell. Maybe even before
They-
that.
Minimum.
Being the
The
government.
U.S. government. Yeah. So, but I think the move to call them UAP probably was not only a PR move because they wanted to get away from the whole
Mhm.
UFO stigma. They wanted to make it a little bit more
Scientific.
kind of scientific and palatable to the average person.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps to their own leadership. You know, I mean, maybe their own leadership was like, "Where I am not calling these things UFOs. Just forget it.
Mhm.
It's not happening."
Come on, Senator.
So,
Need some money.
so, you know, perhaps that's involved too. But I mean, they've been involved for a while, and obviously, they know that something is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you choose to believe that is, I guess, is kind of up to you. I know that there are some Bible verses that you can look at that kind of give you the feeling of UFOs. I know that when I read Ezekiel, it makes me think of a UFO.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
when you read all that stuff, it's just
Mm-hmm.
crazy talk. I mean, Ezekiel was on LSD or something.
Yeah. What was he looking at?
I don't know what he was looking at, but
Explain
it
the
was
angel
it
of
was
God.
whacked out. That guy was on something, right? But prophesying and seeing things of a spiritual nature, you know, I mean, it would blow you away, kind of like Paul or kind of like John in Revelations trying to describe the things that God was showing him. How would you describe that from their context? You know, I mean, How would you?
Didn't have the words for
The
it.
only thing you would be able to do would be you'd have to draw from mythology or like some of the imaginative writings that you have experienced along the way. Jewish tradition, Jewish supernatural tradition, which is thick, by the way. There's a lot of ancient Jewish supernatural tradition. But how else would you explain it? I mean, it would just be crazy, you know? I mean, and who knows what all that stuff's going to look like,
Yeah.
I mean, what God has created.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, and every time an angel shows up or a messenger of God, the scripture talks about the people being fearful or the angels saying, "Do not fear." So whatever they're looking at, even in human form, they've got to have some other attributes that cause people to be fearful.
Yeah. Now, speaking of Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 4 through 5, it says, "As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were, gleaming metal. And from the midst of it came the likeness of four living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had a human likeness." That sounds
What does that bring to
straight
mind?
out of Close Encounters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when he's making the mountain out of mashed potatoes, he was imagining this right here.
Well, you go back to even the 50s. The aliens. What was it? The day the Earth stood still. It had a human form, 10 feet tall, made of metal, but arms and legs and a head.
Yeah.
Feet, hands.
Yeah.
A human likeness.
Colossians 1:16 says, "For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him." Ephesians chapter 6:12, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places." I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, if you choose to believe in intelligent life on other planets, and I'm not even talking about like regular life. Like, to me, if we were to go to Mars and we were to find a pocket of water and we were to find bacteria living in that pocket of water, that would not shake my faith at all. I don't. Even if you went to like Neptune and you found some kind of weird fish living in the water, that would not shake my faith. That would just tell me that God decided to create life all over. Right? That doesn't necessarily mean anything. But if you were to go to Mars and you were there hanging out, building your colony, and then some alien spaceship were to arrive and say, "Hey guys, why are you building on our property?"
Don't you know this is polluted?
Guys, we were here a couple of million years ago, and we just want you to know that we contaminated this world. That's why it's desolate. You should probably not be here.
You guys ever heard of nuclear waste?
like that, something like that would definitely shake your faith, right? I mean, there's a lot said in that statement,
But hey, let me just. Some people believe that. They believe that scenario is going to happen. Not could, but is going to happen.
Is going to happen.
Yeah. What was the one with Jodie Foster?
Contact, was that it?
Contact. You watch that, and there's nothing valid about that whole movie, and yet here's people that think that is what we're waiting on.
Well,
waiting
wasn't it Matthew McConaughey in that movie is a man of faith, right? Or is that a different movie?
Oh, in
Contact?
Contact.
Oh, it's not
I don't
Contact.
I don't
It's,
remember. I don't remember that.
Oh, what is it? It'll come to me someday.
Yeah. The only one I
Yeah.
remember Matthew McConaughey being in was Interstellar, but that was not an alien flick. In as much as it was an interdimensional flick.
Yeah.
That was a strange movie. It was a good movie, but it's strange.
I guess the question for me is, as a person of faith, Can you accept and trust that God has not told you everything about reality? That he could have done other things in other places or other times that he just hasn't told us about, and be comfortable with that.
I think that the lack of information on heaven proves the fact that there's a lot that he hasn't told us.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of information that we just do not have access to, that he has done. And you got to imagine also that we're talking about eternity. I mean, God's been around since before the beginning. He's always been there.
That's right.
It's ridiculous to think that he has done nothing else but this for all of eternity. This little blip of time, this tiny little, as the Bible calls it, a vapor, a breath. In the scope of eternity, the existence of the earth is not even a scratch on the iceberg as far as like what God could have and has probably and will continue to do in the scope of eternity. And that's just us viewing eternity as a timeline. Like we can't conceptualize eternity as existing without time. So
what was your example yesterday? Imagine a line. Close your eyes.
Oh, that's
imagine
one
a
of
line.
them.
Yeah. God, he's outside of that. And
Yeah.
that's why he's so hard to.
Well, that's why we can't conceptualize that
Yeah.
idea, and then also, the idea that, if there are angelic beings, they're operating also outside of the scope of time. And so for them to pop in and out of existence wouldn't be a big deal at all.
Right.
And then also just like throwing like weird ideas out there. Who's to say that God doesn't invent technology?
What do you mean?
Like,
by
why wouldn't he create a UFO for his angels to travel in? Why do they always have to be flying with wings?
Yeah.
Why couldn't they have a chariot of fire like Enoch rode away on?
Mm-hmm.
Some of those questions have always occurred to me. But the endeavor to try and suss them out theologically just has escaped me, the desire. But it is an interesting question.
My mind goes there.
Yeah. I mean, why not?
Yeah. Why not? Well, and like I said, when we talked about Chuck saying, maybe these are angels coming in and out of their realm to be with us in this realm. And we know that they do that. And, when the veil is broken open and they come and go, and every now and then somebody gets a glimpse of that.
Yeah. There's some really interesting theological ideas that have arisen out of this concept, but we're going to talk about here in a little bit, that because of the existential threat to the redemptive story of mankind, theologians have scrambled to come up with different approaches to how you deal with this issue. And the reason they're doing that is because there's a credible threat. Not only a threat, but there is a credible discussion to be had. In 2017, several news organizations revealed the existence of the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, which is a U.S. government-funded program that investigated unidentified flying objects between 2007 and 2012. The secret $22 million program, however, was not the first of its kind. Government UFO studies began in the late 1940s with Project Sign, providing some of the most credible videos of aerial phenomenon to date. Within a few years, the program eventually evolved into Project Blue Book, which you might be familiar with, which actively investigated UFO sightings throughout much of the Cold War. The 2017 revelation that the U.S. government was actively researching UFOs reignited world interest in UFOs and aliens. And what History Channel did in this particular article is they listed the 5 most credible UFO sightings. So the first one is the lights above the New Jersey Turnpike, which happened in 2001. And in this particular incident on the New Jersey Turnpike, around 15 minutes, the turnpike came to a standstill, and people were standing in the freeway looking up at a V-shaped formation of lights that were traveling over the Arthur Kill waterway between Staten Island, New York, and Carteret, New Jersey. The Carteret Police Department's Lieutenant Daniel Tarrant was one of the witnesses, as well as other metro area residents from the Throgs Neck Bridge on Long Island and Fort Lee, New Jersey, near the George Washington Bridge. Air traffic controllers initially denied that any airplane, military jets, or space flights could have caused the mysterious jets, but a group known as the New York Strange Phenomenon Investigators claimed to receive FAA radar data that corroborated the UFO sightings from that night. I'm always suspicious when you get strange groups that come out of nowhere that have information that corroborate it. So that is not compelling to me. What is compelling to me is that a police officer reported it, and that there were multiple people on a freeway that reported it, all at the same time, without cooperating with one another. That's compelling to me.
Pretty busy highway there too. So it seems strange to me that all these people that saw that, and personally, I don't know if I ever heard about it. Maybe I did. Maybe a blip on the news or something. But that would be something. It had to have been hundreds of people.
It was hundreds.
Maybe even thousands. Yeah. Into the thousands. Why is that not pertinent today in regards to UFO sightings? Maybe it is. Maybe I'm disconnected. Because
it probably is. I mean, if you're into UFO phenomenon and it's maybe even perhaps your job as far as the government is concerned, because apparently there's a whole agency designed to deal with it. I mean, it probably is definitely at the top of your radar.
Okay. Ken, you ever heard of that?
I might have, like you say, in a blip in the news back then, but
then it just went away.
It's never been a particular curiosity of mine to really dig into these things and try to follow them to their logical conclusion.
Yeah, there's so much out there when you start to research anything.
It gets real murky real fast.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, it's kind of like any of these kind of, you get conspiracy theorists that get involved, and then once the conspiracy theorists get involved, it becomes very non-scientific very quickly.
Credibility.
Yeah, and it begins to murky out. It's like, so.
Then we get TV shows like Ghost Hunters.
I love those shows. I think they're hilarious.
They're comedy.
I think they're hilarious.
They're just so unoriginal.
Yeah, I mean,
they just recycle the same stuff over.
Oh, it's just the same show every single time. They walk into a place and,
just happen to be cameramen running around.
I like the ones where they go in with the scientific instruments and they're trying to, suss out, what's going on. They have the EMP meters and, all that kind of stuff. And they're fun to watch. The ones that irritate me are the ones that have psychics involved. Those irritate me because the psychic is the ultimate narcissist. Everything is about them. They feel something, they sense something, and then everybody turns their attention to them, and they're like, "What do you feel? What do you sense?" And then they're like, "I sense the spirit of a little girl," and she's, it's like. It's just a seance from the 30s, is all that is. And they don't even have to have anything to prove that what they're doing is. I mean, at least back in the 30s, they had like tricks to try and make it look real. They move the table around, or they had the gauze that would come out like, oh, it's ectoplasm or whatever, These guys these days don't even have to have evidence. They just go out there and just start saying a bunch of stuff that they feel. And then all of a sudden, oh, it's fact. We need to research this. It's like, that's just nonsense to me. We can get into that when we talk about ghosts, because that is something that I have investigated pretty thoroughly. But we talked about the Nimitz encounter. There is the O'Hare International Airport saucer from 2006. So Flight 446 was getting ready to fly to North Carolina from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport when a United Airlines employee on the tarmac noticed a dark gray metallic craft hovering over gate C-17. That day, November 7th, 2006, a total of 12 United employees and a few witnesses outside the airport spotted the saucer-shaped craft around 4:15. The witnesses say it hovered for about 5 minutes before shooting upward, kind of like what you experienced, where it broke a hole in the clouds, enough that pilots and mechanics could see the blue sky. The news report became the most read story on the Chicago Tribune's website to that date and made international news. However, because the UFO was not seen on radar, the FAA called it a weather phenomenon and declined to investigate. Or so they say.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're all over that.
Yeah.
Plausible deniability.
Yeah, I can't imagine that you would get a report like this of credible people in different locations corroborating the same story and not investigate it.
Or say,
Yeah.
no, we didn't see nothing.
It was, don't worry, it was a weather phenomenon, you sillies. You know.
It was a dust devil at the airport.
I mean, something obviously happened. There is the Stephenville sightings, a small town of Stevensville, Texas, 100 miles southwest of Dallas, is most known for its dairy farms. But in the evening of January 8th, 2008, dozens of its residents viewed something unique in the sky. Citizens reported seeing white lights above Highway 67, first in a single horizontal arc and then in vertical parallel lines. It's important to note that this was before Starlink.
Yeah. And before our sort of little helicopter things that we have out there.
Oh, drones?
Drones. Yeah,
Drones.
Before drones.
Local pilot Stephen Allen is estimated that the strobe lights spanned about a mile long and a half mile wide, traveling about 3,000 miles per hour. No reports were reported. No sound was reported.
They're not, 3,000 miles an hour. They're not going to be in your sight for very long. Unless they're going in circles or something.
No.
That's scooting across the sky pretty darn quick.
Yeah. In formation.
Yeah.
So that fast, that formation. I mean, I don't know. Like, the speed of sound is not even close to that, I don't think. What is the speed of sound?
5,283 feet per second.
Did you just guess that, or do you know that?
I think I know that.
How would you know that? How does anybody just know that? Speed of sound.
5,283 feet per second.
Miles per hour. Speed travels at 767 miles per hour. So that's like 3 times, almost 4 times the speed of sound.
Yeah.
That is 4 times the speed of sound. That's almost 5 times the speed of sound.
Mach 4, right?
Something like that. Is that how that's determined?
Each.
5,283. That's the number of feet in a mile, isn't it?
Right.
That's interesting. I want to know what that is. I don't know what that is. What does Mach express the speed of a rocket? When Mach is 1, it is the same as the speed of sound. And it represents the ratio of flow velocity past a boundary to the local speed of sound. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean that if it's Mach 2, it's twice the speed of sound. But let's just ask, what is Mach 2? What is Mach 2? I'm doing research, listeners. Mach 2 is 1,534 miles per hour. So roughly slightly larger than twice the speed of sound.
Yeah, so it must be like
it has
low exponential or logarithmic.
Yeah, it has something to do with airflow or something like that. So it's a different type of
Super
measurement.
fast.
It's really fast, yeah. So Mach 3 would be 23. Mach 4 would be 3, so roughly Mach 4. You're right. You know your stuff, Ken.
I'm ready.
You know things.
Ready for them aliens. I can track them.
You know things. Witnesses believe this event was reminiscent of the Phoenix Light sighting in 1997, while the U.S. Air Force revealed weeks later that F-16s were flying in Brownwood Military Operating Area. Many townspeople didn't buy that explanation, believing that what they saw was too technologically advanced for current human capabilities. Actually, I always dismiss this argument because we have no idea how technologically advanced we are. There's nobody, no normal person knows how advanced our military is. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Have you seen the new destroyers coming out? They are like, I don't know, they're like alien ships. They're all angular and they sit on the water weird, like they're bigger at the bottom than they are at the top,
Mm-hmm.
and they're meant
there's
to be
a
like
scale model of one down there at the Navy base.
Is it really?
Yeah. There's a quarter scale one sitting on the water. It's been there for years.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
they're
think
weird.
They towed one up, or it up to the, the warehouse and the yard up above the bay there.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw one sitting in there at the time too. So,
Love that stuff. I got a cousin that's in Merchant Marines, and he every now and then sends out pictures of stuff that
weird stuff.
he's seen on some of the bases
Mhm.
he goes to.
I
It's
saw
like, hey, are
weird
you supposed
craft
to
out
do
there
that?
on the bay. I don't remember if I told you guys this, but this was like 2 summers ago or something. I heard this sound, and we live near the water, so we hear boats going by all the time, and so you can tell the difference between a speed boat and a bass boat and all the different kinds of boats. And I heard this sound, and it's like, that's not normal. And I looked out our windows over the cape out there, and here comes this boat just ripping across the water. And it was not throwing up a huge rooster tail like you see with speedboats. And it was very angular, it was very low, very long, and it had a black camel pattern on it. And he must have went for about a mile, turned around, and ripped back. And it just looked really weird, like nothing I'd ever seen before.
Interesting.
And so I started looking up, Googling that. And, our armed forces have it's like this super fast, quiet, stealthy attack boat that there's only like 5 or 6 of them made so far. And that was it.
Wow.
The pictures of it matched it.
Yeah.
And so they've got this freaky, weird ramjet underwater engine thing, and it's just crazy.
People have no idea what we're capable of. One of the things that I found interesting about Trump's presidency was the creation of Space Force.
Mm-hmm.
People laugh at Space Force like it's some kind of joke or something, but our country is not going to spend billions of dollars on a military arm that is not necessary. That is just like a joke, right? I think it was built up to be kind of like a joke when it first started, but there's no telling how much satellite warfare is going on.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like literally sending satellites up to destroy other satellites.
Mm-hmm.
No, there was an incident, a year or 2 ago, that was in the news where one of the Russian satellites made a beeline for one of ours and then turned at the last second. And we perceived that, militarily, as that was a threat to show they have the capability to take out any satellite they want.
Yeah, isn't that scary?
And remember back to Reagan's Star Wars, people laughed at that.
Yeah.
Well, they've been working on it since then.
Yeah.
So it's
like one of the reasons why you have to imagine that, a lot of these countries like Russia have not resorted to like nuclear warfare.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that it's obsolete. There's a distinct possibility that intercontinental ballistic warfare is obsolete.
Well, the other rockets that we just got the scare from, was it China or North Korea?
Mm-hmm.
The low altitude, super fast.
Yeah, well, there's a reason why they do that probably. Is you can't launch them into space anymore because they'll just be destroyed. I mean,
That caught a lot of people flat-footed.
Yeah.
We didn't know about that.
Hypersonic, what do they call it? Hypersonic weapons or something like that. Anyways, the last example is the East Coast Go Fast video. Have you guys watched this?
Mm-mm.
I'll put the link in the description so that you can watch it. But it's the U.S. government official video from 2017 when the news leaked it about the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. A video emerged that revealed an encounter between an FA-18 Hornet, Super Hornet, and an unidentified aerial phenomenon seen along the East Coast on a Raytheon Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod. The craft was similar to that spotted off San Diego in 2004. It was a fast-moving white oval about 45 feet long, without wings or exhaust plume. The pilots tracked the object for at least 2,500 feet above the Atlantic Ocean as it flew away and simultaneously rotated on its axis. No explanation ever emerged. So our government is very well aware that something is going on, that there is something happening. And I guess the question that we are looking at is, as a believer, what should you think about these things? Because it does apply to you. That's applicable. How's the redemptive plan of Christ add into the life of an extraterrestrial if they're human? And if they're not human, what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know, is there a redemptive plan, or does there necessarily need to be one? You know, since the redemptive plan of the Bible is specifically designed for people on earth and promised to people on earth, then how does that apply to someone who lives in Alpha Centauri?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean,
Or does anybody live?
or does anyone live, if that's the case?
Mm-hmm.
Or a million years in the future.
Or a
Or
million
in the past.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And can they transition through time and space? You know, I mean, there's all kinds of bonkers questions that you could ask yourself.
Like, has there been a million years
Mm-hmm.
in the past?
well, there's
Yeah,
been an infinite amount of years in the past, because we only measure time based on what we understand it to be, which was created for us. So we're creatures of time, bound to time. We don't understand anything outside of it. Outside of our little blip in eternity, there's a vast amount of space that's available to put any time frame that you want into, because you're not,
Or
if you're
none
not,
at all?
or none at all. If you're,
Yeah.
well, we know that there's something because we exist.
Mm-hmm.
If we exist, it stands to reason that something else exists, because we know that angels exist. We know that demons exist. We know that God has
They're
done
eternal.
other things. You know, I mean, if you look at Revelations, not only are there angels and demons and saints, but there's beasts and other creatures as well. So there's all kinds of things that God has created that we do know about, that operate outside of our earthly domain. That's what that one verse was talking about: principalities and powers
Mm-hmm.
in heavenly places. I mean, you know, we're dealing with forces that are beyond our scope of understanding
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, and I think that's probably what a lot of what the military is experiencing. But it has led to a lot of different kind of viewpoints on what is happening and how we are to deal with it. And a couple of the best articles that I found was one written by, it's just simply called Guest. They don't identify themselves. Well, no, I'm sorry, they do identify themselves. J. Brian Huffling, who writes an article in a Christian website called crossexamined.org. And they deal with a lot of different kind of questions and things, kind of like if you've ever gotten any information off of gotquestion.org,
Yeah.
they're pretty good. And there's a couple of different ones like that. These guys kind of do the similar thing with different types of problems. He goes into great depth about the history, about the nature of them, and then theories of UFOs and aliens. He says this. He says, some have tried to explain UFOs as simply being secret technology either had by the U.S. or other nations. It is indeed the case that there have advanced technological systems that causes UFO reports, and the Air Force has actually capitalized on people thinking they are UFOs in order to provide a cover for their own technology. Richard Doty is a famous or infamous example of one who has admitted to this happening. However, it is a difficult pill to swallow that there were aircraft in 1940s that could travel at speeds and perform aerial maneuvers that even today cannot be duplicated. The intelligence specialist who testified before Congress noted that we do not have any evidence that such technology is possessed by either U.S. And again, we don't know what technology is possessed by the U.S. or what we have experienced or found. This is a really in-depth article, and I might link it in the Subsplash documentation. One of the best ones that I found was a Baptist News Global article written by Rack Pidcock. And he goes into great deal about all the different things. He looks at the Department of Justice footage that was put out after the East Coast Go Fast video was put out, which was highlighted in a 60 Minutes episode, by the way. But he goes into showing that, and then he goes into these different kind of theories that have existed for a long time, because Christians have been dealing with the idea of extraterrestrial existence for a very long time. It'll actually shock you how long Christian theologians have been dealing with various kind of extraterrestrial ideas. It goes all the way back to the 3rd century, believe it or not. In the 3rd century, Constantine's advisor, Lactantius, I don't know, that's a weird name. He speculated this: how is it with those who imagine that there are antipodes opposite to our footsteps, that they say anything to this purpose? Or is there anything one so senseless as to believe that there are men whose footsteps are higher than their heads? Or that the things which to use are in a recumbent position, with them hang in an inverted direction, that the crops and trees grow downwards, that the rains and snows and hails fall upwards to the earth? What he's talking about is a concept known as the upside down. You might recognize that terminology if you've been watching Netflix. There's a show called Stranger Things, and one of the highlights of that show is something they call the upside down, where it's like an alternate dimension where things are kind of not reversed, but they're different. In this theory, there are extraterrestrial beings that exist in a plane opposite our own that actually mimic us and are. In this theory, there would be a group of 3 guys sitting around doing a podcast in an alternate dimension that is mirror reverse underneath us of what we are doing right now, which would account for a lot of the different kind of phenomenons that people see and experience, whether it's ghosts, whether it's UFOs, whether it's, psychic phenomenon, whatever. Levitation, perhaps. Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of different kind of things that go into that. But that's like one of the things that scientists have been dealing with, or not scientists, but Christians have been speculating for a very long time. St. Augustine was also concerned about the theological implications for this when he said, as to the fable that there are antipodes, which are these beings that live in the upside down, that is to say, men on the opposite side of the earth. This was potentially when they believed that the earth was flat. I actually had a conversation with a flat earther yesterday here at church. Yeah, which was interesting.
There's more than one?
And a lively conversation. Very pleasant, but lively, because they're very passionate about what they understand.
Define that, because in today's, with all our technology, how on God's green earth can somebody believe that the earth is flat?
Because all of the photographs that we have of the earth from space are computer generated, and that we have never even been out of high orbit. They do not believe we've ever been to the moon, that's not even a thing, that was all staged. And that the earth is flat and lives under a dome, which is this would be another great conversation for another podcast. They live under a dome called the firmament, which they all get from Scripture. And the models of the flat earth that are created are generated specifically mostly out of Scripture. And a lot of the people that are flat earthers are Christians.
How do they explain people sailing around the world, flying around the world?
They don't believe that any of that evidence has ever occurred. If you show them a video where scientists prove the curvature of the earth by measurement, they'll disavow it. They'll say that's not true.
Have they themselves ever been in an airplane? I mean,
they would say that that's a phenomenon of light. They would say that the guys who have jumped out of like pods and, like the Red Bull thing where he was up way up in the air on a balloon and he looked out and there was a curvature of the earth. They said the reason that the earth was curved is because he was using a fisheye lens right? There's all these explanations for why these things are
I've
not
seen
true.
the curvature of the Earth from the top of Denali.
Yeah.
You can see it with your bare eyes. It's like that is round.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's light bending.
That's the
Yeah.
lack of oxygen
Yeah.
in my brain. It's
Yeah.
causing this
That's it.
mental phenomenon.
Not to mention that math works because the Earth is spherical.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like we do things on the Earth that work because they're spherical, like GPS, for instance, or like compass measurements on airplanes. There's actually a video out that demonstrates how that airline pilots actually know the Earth is flat because their instruments prove it. But nobody is saying it. It always boils down to the conspiracy so large that it is beyond the scope of imagining.
So insidious.
Yeah, so insidious that all government agencies are in on it, that all foreign agencies are in on it, that all the world powers are in on this conspiracy to conceal the fact that the Earth is flat
For the purpose of
for some reason. I have no idea
to protect
why.
the antipods.
I have no idea why that would be relevant.
Oh, maybe that's it. The antipods that have come to our side to protect the other side.
Perhaps.
And then there's an inverse of them protecting us.
That's
from
kind of
them.
the thing about that, right? Is if you travel to the other side to protect the other side, then your person from the other side automatically comes to protect you from their side. So it's really kind of a wash.
That's the people you see walking around going, whoa.
What's going on here?
So has that got the theory of equilibrium built into it?
I don't know.
That you have to step across the barrier at the same time your antipod steps across, or else you create a fracture in the time-space continuum and we all get sucked into a black hole.
Yeah, I don't know. Perhaps. Perhaps. If it
It's
has
dangerous.
anything.
We need to go back to the future.
I actually don't think that has anything to do with dimensions, though. I think that's actually a physical plane underneath there that people are just walking on, I guess, and it's just like we're tied to
Hey
it.
guys, how's it going
Hey,
down
guys.
there? Right? They're right there.
What would you say if somebody said, "Hey, quit that"?
that hurt to sleep. No, you're supposed to be doing a anti-podcast, right?
There's another one, Plurality of Worlds. 16th century astronomer Tycho Brahe refused to consider Copernicus's idea about the Earth revolving around the sun because he calculated that such a universe would have at least 3 million times the volume he had assumed. Of course, now we know that it's infinitely larger than anybody anticipated. He asked this question: why would God have created so much empty space? This led astrophysicist Paul Wallace to reflect in his book, Love and Quasars, quote, he resisted a larger, stranger universe because he resisted a larger, stranger God. Which is an interesting statement.
Yeah.
We don't want to believe that God is bigger than we think that he is because that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, we fear the unknown.
In the 17th century, however, Giordani Bruno was a poet who imagined an infinite universe where stars were actually suns orbited by planets filled with life. His curiosity and wonder led him to explore the convergence of philosophy, math, poetry, and theoretical cosmology in ways that moved him to deny eternal conscious torment, embrace a theology of universal restoration, and a question of how our literal definitions of God were merely finite metaphors for the infinite. And for that, he was burned at the stake.
Of course.
It's our actors and actresses, our entertainers today, seem to have more power over the people.
Yeah.
With their thoughts and their ideas. And this guy was a poet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Just saying.
So that's an idea. I mean, and that's kind of the idea that spawned things like Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry was inspired by this idea that there were all these suns, and all around all these suns were these planets that were filled with intelligent life. And to go where no man has gone before. It's kind of spawned from this idea that we want to explore these strange new worlds, and strange new galaxies, and experience these things. Just like Captain Kirk.
And we are.
And so a lot of stuff is a lot of that science fiction is becoming science fact. Which is exactly what happens with science fiction. But so. There is an Earth-centered cosmos, which is what most theologians believe. Christianity heavily relies on the idea that the earth is the center of the cosmos. Whether the not necessarily that the cosmos revolves around the earth, but in a kind of weird narcissistic way, the earth was constructed and the universe was built around it. The earth is the centerpiece.
Everything else is the afterthought.
This is the idea that like groups like Answers in Genesis goes into. Actually, Answers in Genesis is very firm on this idea. They warn that the idea of extraterrestrial life stems largely from a belief in evolution. Their theology of salvation does not give them space for aliens because intelligent alien beings cannot be redeemed. God's plan of redemption is for human beings, those descended from Adam. So they take a very hard line, which is very Answers in Genesis like.
Yep.
I'm not sure why believing in this is the one hole in their argument that I think. I'm not sure why believing that there is intelligent life is spawned from evolution. Perhaps if you believe in evolution, that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
I would guarantee you that there is somebody in this world that is a staunch creationist that also believes that there is a possibility for intelligent life on other planets. Because if God can create intelligent life on this planet, he can create intelligent life on another planet. And in fact, if he exists outside of time and space, there's nothing to say that he could not have, that Christ could not have incarnated himself on every single planet with every single intelligent life form and died on the cross of Calvary in every single world and created a Bible for their own culture. In reality.
Yeah. Now, that statement, do you think that would and may cause some people in Christianity to falter?
Oh, for sure. Well, I don't know about falter. To me, I don't think it has to be a question of whether your faith is faltered. I think that the idea of finding extraterrestrial life is interesting, but in no way, shape, or form does it ever bring into question what God has done on earth for mankind, which is kind of the systematic theological approach to how to deal with extraterrestrials. There's a couple of different kind of ways to look at it, like a dispensationalist view, like the people who are behind like the Left Behind series or things like that. They would convince you that the government is going to use extraterrestrial beings as a means to introduce the rapture or explain the rapture, and not only explain the rapture, but introduce the idea that the alien, that Christ is evil. And you can see that played out like in a story fashion if you really think about it. Because if you look at all the different types of like alien things that are going on, what happens is alien abductions. People get taken up and then they're never seen, and then they're not seen for a while, and then they get brought back or whatever. One of the main kind of new age beliefs is that there are actually cloaked alien ships all in orbit around the earth, and they're waiting for people to become in tune with the different vibrations of the earth or whatever. And those people that reach enlightenment will be raptured up into these ships and taken to a new place. And those that remain will be left there, or perhaps they'll destroy the earth. There's a lot of new age beliefs that center around that idea. So a dispensationalist view is not far off from being imaginable. If you really think about it, think about the city Foursquare, described in Revelations, that's going to come down and hover over Jerusalem where Christ will reign with a rod of iron. If you were to see a Foursquare city, I forget how big it is, but it's miles. It's huge. Come down out of space and hover over Jerusalem, and this cube will be big enough that you could see it from space. What would you think if you have been told all of your life that there are UFOs and that there's abductions and all that? You're going to think this is Independence Day all over again. Yeah. So a dispensationalist view of that is not far off from being believable. In his systematic theology, Robert Leatham says the existence of aliens, quote, would be no threat to the faith, since all it would entail is that such extraterrestrial intelligent life would be incidental to God's purpose for the human race. He says these beings could be angels, they could be fallen angels, they could be living creatures around the throne of God, as mentioned in Revelations. They point out that the scope of the Bible's vision for God's reign in cosmology is also earth-centered. In Psalms 8, the entire cosmos exists as a hierarchy from God at the top, above, the heavens down through the divine beings, and the humans below, ruling over the animals on the land. In the typical evangelical gospel story of creation, fall, redemption, and restoration, the entire cosmos felt the effects of the fall based on Adam's sin, including the farthest galaxies. This narrative would subject all alien worlds to the human evangelical story. That's an interesting concept. And I was brought up under the reins of systematic theology. That's what I was taught when I was going through my training. And so that actually makes sense to me, but probably only because I was brought up in that kind of theology.
The question still remains for me, and maybe for many others, is what is that going to do to our faith?
I think it depends on how you view it.
Yeah. And we have presented already today a half a dozen different views on aliens.
Oh, we're not even done yet.
Yeah, I know. I've got the script in front of me.
Yeah, I mean,
good gravy, Mavis. Where does this end?
It's extensive because it's a big question, like you said. You know, I mean, if you are a thinking person and you are theological by any stretch, you have to assume that if intelligent life were to be found, it would shake the foundations of most religions.
Yes.
Particularly Christianity, because Christianity is very, very much earth-centered. And if there were intelligent life, you would have to make compensations in theology for that intelligent life if you don't already make it already.
Unless, as we mentioned earlier, that intelligent life is actually angels.
Or any other type
any other entity of God.
Yeah, any other creature that God has created that we are not aware of. I mean, there's no guarantee that we know all of what God has or does.
We don't even know what the Nephilim are.
No, we're confused on so many issues. Yeah. And I think the reason for that is because it's not relevant to our redemptive story. If it were important for our redemptive story, I think that God would have made it available to us.
You must believe in Jesus Christ, not the Nephilim.
That's right. Yeah, it's all about Christ, and that has to be confirmed, which is another interesting point, because if there is extraterrestrial life that has intelligent life, and let's just say for the sake of argument that this is intelligent life that has the capability of being redeemed, do they have how would that work, right? How would you bring the redemptive story of Christ to an intelligent life that is not on the earth that needs to be redeemed? And that question is difficult for people, but not for God. I mean, I think people forget that God is He is the arbiter of all things that are true. He gets to determine what is true. And here's the way I think about it, right? If we fly out and we go to Mars and we set up a colony and we're there, and then, you know, a bus of aliens shows up and they're like, "Hey guys, you want to hang out?" You know, and we find out that they're intelligent. Not only are they intelligent, but they're spiritually cognizant.
Right. They have flying buses.
And they are capable of sin, and they are under the curse of sin because of what mankind did. I would have to assume that God has planned a redemptive story for them as well, because it would not make sense for God in his justice to punish someone without giving them the opportunity for redemption. It wouldn't be within his character. And so it doesn't shake mine at all. I mean, I would just assume, like, hey, we have intelligent life.
For me,
God has dealt with that.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. Show me the proof.
It would be interesting to see, like, if something like that were to happen, would there arise out of that culture theological people, doctors, scholars that would come forward and say, this is what we have. This is what we have been told. Wouldn't it be interesting if the Bible and their theological ideologies meshed together perfectly? What proof would that be that the Bible is legitimate? I think people look at it completely the wrong way. I think it's not a glass half empty. I think it's a glass half full, because if God is who he says that he is, he's going to prove he is who he is. And man, could you imagine?
That opens up a whole can of worms.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
How do you define intelligent life?
Yeah.
Relative to us, relative to God, relative to bacteria?
Well, I mean, I think intelligence...
If they sin, would there not be intergalactic racism?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Yeah. Which might
There's
be
all
actually
kinds
be a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and there could be hatred, and there's murder. And
Because the human species screwed it up for the whole cosmos.
yeah, could you imagine if you found that out via theology?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's another
We're
whole...
the most hated of all beings.
Yeah,
in the
and
universe.
perhaps they're here waiting for the opportunity to just destroy the earth because of our inability to keep things right. You know,
Okay, for
it could
those
be a
of
whole-
you that
we
are
don't
out there
repent.
listening to this podcast right now, all right, we're still sane. We're still on this planet. We're still believing
obviously,
in Jesus Christ.
obviously
as our
this
Savior.
doesn't change any of your theology or any of your doctrine or anything like that. It's just fun to conjecture about.
It is.
And it doesn't have to be a big deal, right? I mean, it does. You don't have to be in a panic about it.
Yeah, don't be afraid.
Yeah, it's not a big deal because right now there's no reasoning behind it
No.
at this point.
I'll tell you this, that there is something to be concerned about, though, that we need to really watch out for. And it's something called cosmolatry. And it is, so I'll just read what Elliot Nelson wrote in BioLogos. He said, the possibility of alien life forces us to ask what it means to be made in the image of God. He says, Christianity is cosmic. It makes bold claims about the nature and the future of the physical universe and must therefore face the challenge of modern cosmology. And thus, the challenge is, quote, an opportunity to face apparent tensions and conflict with honesty and learn from them rather than smoothing over them. An opportunity to rethink what we think we know in a pursuit of a richer and more imaginative and indeed more faithful vision of the story of Christianity. I think what you're going to find is that there is a danger that there is a new religion going to be created from this theology of the cosmos.
It already has.
Oh yeah, for
Several.
sure.
Yeah.
Andrew Burgess says this. He says, quote, as long as someone is thinking in terms of geocentric universe and an earth deity, the story has a certain plausibility. As soon as astronomy changes theories, however, the whole Christian story loses the only setting in which it would make sense. With the solar system no longer the center of anything, imagining that what happens here forms the center of the universe drama becomes simply silly. That's the kind of ideology that's created from that concept. That because you find intelligent life, that the story of redemption for Earth suddenly doesn't make sense. I don't find that to be true. I don't find that to be true at all. Just because you find intelligent life somewhere else does not dismiss the redemptive story of mankind. It just shows us that it's centralized to us. Now, also, then the question arises, if we were never intended to know about intelligent life on other planets because God didn't write it in his book and it wasn't something for us to know, then are we seeing what is actually a great deception that will cause many to fall away? You know, could this be demonic manifestation? Mm-hmm. That's another whole concept.
Well, if you think about a lot of the movies that have been made in this genre, they have a lot of universalism built into them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you can see that becoming, kind of an overarching deception to try and absorb all other theologies.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how you look at it. I mean, I guess ultimately the question that we're asking here today is it wrong for a Christian to believe that there is extraterrestrial life? Based on the evidence that you're seeing, is it wrong?
What is there value in it?
Well, that's another
Or
question
is there-
altogether.
Yeah.
Because it could be right to do, but there could be no value in it.
True.
So,
That's what I would say. Because at the end of the day, Christianity is personal.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is what you make out of it. I mean, like from my point of view, I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know if it's aliens. I don't know if I know it's some other type of creature that God has created. I don't know if it's, parallel dimensions. I don't know if it's alien life from other planets. I can't dismiss that because I don't know for certain that God did not do that. I just know what he wrote in his book in regards to Earth. And, it brings into light new questions, like the heavens declare. Well, what if he wasn't just talking about nature? What if the heavens declare in a very literal sense that these creatures come forth and they declare the glory of God? That would definitely not be demonic. What happens then? So I mean, there's just too many questions to just dismiss it out of hand. But also, that doesn't have to shake your faith. I mean, you don't have to be worried.
It's not a zero-sum game.
No, it's not. Yeah, it doesn't have to be. Well, there's extraterrestrial life. The Bible's a lie. No, it's nonsense. The Bible is a spiritual book about the journey of the relationship of mankind and his relationship with God. That's what it's about, specifically and purely. It has nothing to do with extraterrestrial life because it deals with mankind created in his image. It bears question as to whether or not something else would be created in another world that would be created in his image, and perhaps not. Perhaps it's a completely different issue. Perhaps intelligent life on other planets is formed in a completely different way for a completely different purpose, And maybe it doesn't exist at all. Who knows? I don't feel, though, that Christians need to be panicking or be fearful or be hesitant to observe and to study and to be knowledgeable. Being knowledgeable of something doesn't necessarily mean you're complicit to it. I certainly don't believe that if you are researching UFOs or you're researching aliens or you're interested in that and it fascinates you, that doesn't necessarily automatically make you apostate or something. I mean, I think that's a ridiculous notion.
Yeah.
But it's just like anything else. Be careful when you're messing around with stuff like that because you don't know what it is. You don't know what kind of Pandora's box you're opening up. And so it's just like anything paranormal, anything supernatural. You need to approach it with if you are determined that you are going to study and research these things, you need to make sure that you are in a relationship with God that is good enough that will withstand whatever it is that you will find. If your faith is not strong enough, then you need to back away.
You will falter.
You will falter. Yeah. You need to back away. You need to be very firmly planted in your belief structure before you pursue things like that. And then you need to ask yourself, what are your motives behind it? Why do you want to study it? I oftentimes think it would be interesting to kind of do paranormal research, not to prove that there are ghosts, but to demonstrate that it is demonic manifestation. I mean, what a proof that would be of a spiritual realm that exists and is battling outside of what we understand. But would there be any value in that? What would be the time expenditure? What would be your motive behind that? It's like those are the questions that you need to ask. What's the heart behind what it is that you're doing? Because that would be the ultimate question. So I don't know if we came to any conclusions other than that. It's an intense.
I feel like we're right in
one.
the middle of it.
Yeah.
We just got it started. Now we're going to fall into this deep hole and work our way out. Sounds like fun.
Yeah. So if you have any questions or comments, or you have an experience yourself, reach out to us at 3p@ethelbaptistchurch.org. Or you can reach out to our Facebook page, Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar.
Do we dare
share
say
your story.
put it on your connection card?
Yeah, put it on your connection card. Why not? I mean, I would like to know if people have had experiences, because that just is another, question to be answered, and another thing to think about.
Use another piece of paper if necessary.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed to Christians sharing their experiences. I've had a large number of supernatural experiences in my life that I can't explain by normal measures. UFOs just don't happen to be one of them. Yeah. But I know people that have had deep extraterrestrial.
Do you know anybody who's had an
experiences.
after-death experience?
Not personally, no.
That might be an interesting episode.
Yeah. That's also another interesting one, is if that's even possible. Some people say that it is.
Out of body. Chris, you and I have shared our angel experiences.
I've had an angel experience, yes. Very real one.
Yeah, absolutely.
That really defined for me the ability of God to interact in our physical world.
Yeah. I think you shared that on the on your
It's in his testimony.
Oh, is it? Did I share it in my
Yeah.
testimony?
Yeah.
That was an interesting experience. That's something I'll never forget. I can't recall the guy's face, but I can recall his height, and I can recall his physical stature. I can recall the way he was dressed, and how odd that I thought that it was at the time.
Out there in the middle of the night.
I mean, this was 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Guys out there jogging. Who does that?
Angels.
Exactly. So, there's some interesting things to discuss out there, and I think it's kind of foolish to just dismiss it out of hand. There's something to be talked about there, and there's something that can be revealed to us. And if you approach it from a biblical worldview, and you approach it from the concept that God is who he says that he is, then in reality, anything is possible.
Yeah, good to go.
Yeah. So, just be careful. Approach everything with a grain of salt, and don't just fall for everything, because there's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, just
what's the old saying? If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything.
Yeah.
So stand for Christ.
Yeah. Carl Sagan said, when we consider the heavens, our posture must turn from earth chauvinism to humility.
Funny man.
Mathematically, he's correct. I mean, if you just are a mathematician, the statistical possibility of us being the only intelligent life in the cosmos is a statistical impossibility.
As is Christ fulfilling all the Old Testament prophecies about him.
His birth.
His birth is just,
go right on down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. With God, all things are possible. He wasn't excluding anything in that. All things are possible with God. I mean, he raised people from the dead, for heaven's sake.
Yep.
He could create a life form on another planet.
Sure.
Why is that a big deal? I don't understand why people freak out about that. Yeah. Man, we traveled to Alpha Centauri, and we saw this cat creature running around. Meow. Meow. Okay, we'll bring it back. Let's make them into pets. That's awesome. Can they?
Maybe we did.
Can we exist on this world?
If any
Did
animal
it taste like chicken?
Did it taste like chicken?
If any animal is an alien, it's definitely a cat.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I don't know. The what is it? Axolotl? Those are freaky looking.
Oh yeah, they're creepy.
Axolotl. Don't know it.
Look it up.
Those cats that have no hair.
Is it a cryptid?
What are those called?
Is it a cryptid?
The hairless cats.
They're called that.
No,
Hairless cats.
I don't do.
He's doing research, ladies and germs.
Or some of those deep sea fish.
Yeah.
That are just a
The
blob
angler.
with eyes and things sticking out and lighting up.
Sphinx. They're called Sphinx. And Donskoy. The Donskoy cat is a muscular breed that ranges from completely hairless to some having hair and bald spots.
Kind of like me.
That is one ugly cat. Dog.
Cat.
That
I have
cat.
hair, but I have bald spots.
That cat is frightening looking. Like if I were to wake up and that thing was looking at me, like laying on my chest, I'd shoot it. Like, what is that alien?
It's not asking to be fed. It's gonna eat you.
Like a chest burster.
Yeah. Well, you got any last thoughts, Greg? Nanu.
Are you kidding me? Of course I do.
Live long and prosper.
There's just not enough time right here to put all those out there. But this has been fun, and I think, it might be fun to give us some feedback out there, people in podcast land.
Yeah, let us know
Let
what
us
you
know
think.
if this is something that you want us to continue on.
And we can explore all kinds of ideas. We'll eventually get into the Nephilim. That's a deep,
that's a great one.
I
love it.
Deep discussion about giants on Earth. That's another one that's it ties in with the Nephilim.
Yep.
You know, all the kind of
sons
stuff.
of God mating with the daughters of men.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It's weirdness.
Yeah, it's weirdness. Any thoughts, Ken? Any last thoughts?
Well, what comes to mind for me is just a gratitude and thankfulness for God's promises in his word.
Yeah.
You can stand on those regardless of
amen.
whatever weirdness we discover. His promises are sure, and you should feel secure in those. He's got you covered, regardless of what else happens.
Yeah. No matter what we find out there, his redemptive story for mankind doesn't change.
Yeah.
100%. We're covered. That's a good thought. I like that thought. That's a good thought. Well, that about does it for us today. And if you like this episode, which if you like this episode, something's wrong with you.
You're crazy.
But as always, thank you for joining us. If you have an idea for another episode, or you'd like to hear us investigate, or a guest that you'd like for us to interview, send us an email at 3p@ethelbaptistchurch.org. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks to Greg and Ken, and I thank you, Chris, for helping to produce this episode. Gavin's not with us, so I'm having to do everything. And thank you, Ethel Baptist Church, for your generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. Till next time, remember the Great Commission, guys. Go into all the world, reach the lost with the gospel, and build disciples that can do the same. And with that, we are out.